Welcome to Silicon Valley Nonprofits, a service of KMVT Community Media. I'm Bev Lenahan, your host. Today our guest is Don Burgett, Executive Director of Life Lab. Thanks for coming today, Don.
Happy to be here. Thank you, Bev.
Nice to see you. Well, we know you do classroom training in the garden, but the teachers are quite involved in this process. Tell me, how does that work?
Well, a few different ways, but at its core, it really is about that concept of a garden as a classroom. So throughout everything that we do, we generally take that approach of saying, this is a dynamic learning environment. So for teachers, some just gravitate to that very naturally. Either they love being outdoors and they love taking their kids outdoors, or they've had gardening experience. But for many, that can be a very big barrier.
Yes.
It can feel inaccessible and really hard to take kids out there. And then, of course, kids get very excited. They actually, on the other hand, calm down a lot in the garden often. But initially, it's such a dynamic, exciting environment.
A lot of energy.
Yeah, that kind of the classroom management side of teaching, it can be very different outside. So we try to approach this in a number of ways. We offer curriculum materials and online videos and webinars and things to help educators understand how to do that. And those are based on years of experience with workshops with teachers in our model garden classroom in Santa Cruz, as well as all across the country, visiting people. But mostly what we do is direct training with teachers. So whether it's locally mentoring teachers, having repeat visits, developing learning communities with teachers in their districts, or on our site or going around the country and delivering teacher training workshops for 1 or 2 days or 5-day institutes.
Well, that's got to be a big help to be able to travel and do that. I know our Rotary Club actually helped build some gardens for some schools, and then we made sure that their funds were available for the training through Life Lab, and it worked out really, really well. It was kind of a win-win-win for everybody.
Yeah, it's so important because otherwise many teachers do find it inaccessible, and we see that challenge and then overcoming that challenge right now in some of our work with the Pajaro Valley Unified School District in Watsonville in southern Santa Cruz County. We're working closely there and have a deep partnership with staff on the ground, working directly alongside the teachers with the kids.
Through the school system.
It's through the school system, and helping to renovate school gardens and really create robust garden classroom programs. And you know, initially there were some teachers that would gravitate to it, but it took that kind of training and support and also modeling. So often if we have the opportunity, or if we know there are teachers in a school or a district that have that experience, or we can seed with some training, somebody, you know, that the Rotary or others send to us, those teachers then influence their peers because they can say, oh no, here's how you do it.
And it's not so hard.
Yeah.
Especially with the robust curriculum you have. I know you have. Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, tell us about one child that you know whose life was sort of turned around as a result of this experience of I know when I experienced it, I felt like a little kid again. Tell us about a child you know that was really impacted by Life Lab.
Well, you know, it's a great question, and some wonderful stories come to mind. I'll share one. There was a young child actually in this Pajaro Valley work. So in the last couple of years, we helped a Mesty Elementary School rebuild a garden that they had started many, many years ago, but it wasn't really integrated into the core of the school's operations and their teaching. And so it naturally, especially during thin budget times, wound up being somewhat neglected and less used. And so we were able to come in. They were lucky. They had a new teacher who was interested in doing something with it right when we had some resources to come into their district and help. And it's been beautiful to see the change at that school as they have this now beautiful garden, very active. And initially, you know, the teachers, as I said, took a little time to come out, but now every kindergarten, first and second grade teacher, and it's a big school, over 650 students in elementary. But all of those teachers are using the garden regularly for classes. And then the upper grades are starting to come in too. So amid all of that, you have this mix of kids, some of whom just go there naturally and love it. But there are often some, and often they're English language learners in particular. They are struggling, and it shows up and it looks like behavioral problems in school. And sometimes it's a home issue.
It's really confusion and a little bit of fear in there too.
Yes, and so this one child, who I'll call Jorge, he was struggling in the classroom environment, and so this teacher, who was the garden champion, really recognized that, well, he needs some support in a different way. And what they had started doing as the garden blossomed and became sort of the heart of the school, everybody wanted to keep planting other things. So they had started putting planters around the school. And she went to Jorge and said, when he was outside the classroom because something wasn't going right, and said, you know, what do you think about this planter? He really was connecting with the growing things, and turned out his parents work in the fields in agriculture, and so there was a meaningful connection for him there. And she said, would you like to take care of this little piece of land? And so then he started watering it whenever it needed water, and he got to nurture something, which, as we know, nurtures ourselves too.
Yes, absolutely.
And then the follow-on to that was, I was down at the school many months later, the next school year actually, and had a group of adults visiting the garden, and we were out there talking, and this little boy comes walking over around the edge of the garden, and he's just sort of looking at us, as many of the kids were, you know, who are these folks?
Right.
But he actually came around and by himself, and he said, started talking to us a little bit. He said, big sunflower. And after we had a little interaction with him, he walked away. Our educator on the ground said, that was Jorge, because she had told us this story.
Nice.
And the idea that he would come out and engage with this unknown group of adults was completely different from the way he was showing up in school. So we know how much it helps bring some kids really out of their shell. And it happens between kids as well. We see a lot of cooperation and communication growth through collaborative exercises and lessons. So
again, it's this holistic approach. So I'm sure you would appreciate having some more help doing what you do so well. So how can people out there really help you continue the vision that you have to make sure that there are these classrooms available anywhere they are needed, and that's most everywhere?
Well, there's a lot of information, including all of our contact, on our website at www.lifelab.org. And we welcome people to connect with us about their desires or what they're doing with garden-based learning in schools and out of schools as well. We support educators of all kinds, both in this region and across the country, through training and curriculum for teachers. And we're actually finding that we're reaching almost 500,000 students across the country each year through those outreach programs, as well as serving 5,000 kids locally.
Well, we got a lot more kids to serve, right?
Yes.
A lot more. So, you know, there are lots of digital ways to reach kids today. You're doing a little bit more with some webinars and distance training.
We are. That was an interesting nut to crack for us several years ago, because we thought, well, we can't do this with webinars. We're all about hands-on experiential learning, and that applies to teachers too. And we have to be in a garden. But then, you know, as we really thought about it and we observed others, we realized that there was some great core content. So, for instance, we had a tremendous number of teachers, over 1,200, I think, involved with a webinar on how to use gardens to teach new Common Core and next generation science standards lessons.
Let's try to make more of that happen. So I hope the people out there will be motivated to look more into LifeLab and help you do what you do so well. Thank you,
so
Don,
much
for being with us today.
Much appreciated. Thanks, Bev.
Thank you.